when we notice phenomena, and some people are getting sort of, there's a lot of sickness around at the moment, a lot of fever, a lot of coughing, a lot of dizziness, and all sorts of weird stuff going on at the moment. Um, but then, why do some people get affected and not others? Why are some people more affected and some less affected, and so on? So it goes on. And I believe that because we are not, although we might believe ourselves to be, we are not isolated, separate individuals. This is what Einstein talked about as well. That we're not this, we're a part of a collective consciousness. The body is separate, this is for sure. But in consciousness, we're all connected. And this should be obvious for those of you who've done any amount of clearing whatsoever, because you'll be picking up information that doesn't exist in your immediate environment. If it's another person, they could be, on the other side of the planet. There could be a property in Australia, it could be anywhere, it doesn't really matter. You can still connect, you can still make connections to that. And so then there's something else happening. We're not divided, we're not separate. We appear to be separate because of physical body, but in consciousness we're not, we're all connected. And then we get to the idea that Lynn McTaggart put forward, and many others as well, of course, that we live in a field, in a sea of consciousness, in a soup, cosmic soup. I mean, there's all sorts of words for it. It's not important at the moment what word we use, but we live in this informational field. And the field, and again, according to Tesla, that this field, it consists of, it's just frequency, it's energy, it's information. So everything's operating at a particular frequency, and I've spoken about this a few times, that it's our nervous system that's analysing all of these frequencies that it exists within. The nervous system then gives us a picture, form, sound, colour, taste, touch, etc. And every creature on the planet's got a slightly different nervous system, of course, so they observe that their reality is quite different to ours. But we observe this reality through our nervous system, and the brain then interprets the information and creates a picture or a sense that we live in a physical, solid world, when in actual fact we live in a world of information. Now, if we live in a world of information, if you can just sort of get a hold of that one for a moment, that we live in this world of information, a sea of consciousness where all information is held. It's spoken about the mind, and my belief is that you don't have a mind. Your nervous system is accessing mind. The mind is non-local, meaning it's not confined in time and space, it's everywhere. And mind, the big mind, the mind of God, if you like, whatever, contains all information that's ever been, that ever will be. And so we've got this informational field that we exist within, but we only have access to a certain amount or limited aspects of that mind. And our limited aspects they're limited because of our conditioned past, because of this identification with the body, the thinking that the feelings and thoughts are ours, blaming and judging others externally to the self. But what if that's not the case? What if we exist within this field of information, and the only thing that's protecting you from low energy frequencies, disturbances, viruses, bacteria, whatever, is your immune system, which has been highly compromised by incorrect understanding, by the way we think and way we deal with stuff. So it's not really true, but we think it's true. And then that keeps us in a low frequency state, which is very fear-based. And a fear-based state is going to attract all sorts of shit into its life. It just does that automatically. It's a resonance. So we're actually resonating with information in that sea of consciousness. And all the time we continue to misunderstand what's going on, misinterpret what's going on, we remain very fear-based. And very fear-based is keeping us very, very low and keeping us a prisoner to our conditioned past. I've been noticing increasingly, in just recently, really. I mean, this has been an ongoing process for me for many years, of course. But I've just recently increasingly noticed a shift in my own energy, moving from whatever frequency it was at, a couple of days ago, a week ago, a month ago, whatever, to a different level of understanding. More information, different people I meet, different situations arise, because the system is no longer bound by fear, no longer bound by a common one that I was sort of certainly subject to for a long time, which was anxiety, which is still fear-based. And so all of these frequencies that we identify with currently are keeping us a prisoner to the past and preventing us from accessing more information contained in this sea of consciousness. So then when something happens to us, the challenge is that depending on what it is, of course, and how intense it is, we tend to think, oh, this is mine, this is I am this, I'm that, I'm feeling sick, I've got a headache, I've got whatever. And then, of course, the moment you identify with it, you give it energy, in a sense, you become it. So now we're dealing with, having done this in the past, we have become certain beings, certain ways of responding, reacting, conditioned by our past. We've adopted certain ways of being, which have become familiar, but they weren't who we are. They're still not who we are, not who we truly are, but they're limiting us by our conditioned past, by our lack of understanding about what's going on. I think it's only this lack of understanding that creates a very fearful environment in which we live. We're obviously surrounded by a huge amount of fear, huge amount of anxiety, huge amount of polarization at the moment. There's a lot of stuff going on the planet. But consider that's just information that's being put by individuals who are identifying with low frequency information. That's just information being put into this mind, which then becomes available to everybody, of course. Now, it's not whether we identify with that or not. There's a whole bunch of reasons why we would or why we wouldn't, of course. But the more we identify with the collective, the more disempowered we become, because we think that the feelings that we're experiencing are ours. There's a certain energy associated with them, we identify with them, and then, of course, we give them more energy. So ultimately, whatever you're noticing, because people often, way back in the day, not quite so much these days, but that people certainly would say, well, when we're clearing, the concept is that we notice phenomena, but we don't give it any more energy. And so some people say, well, this isn't mine. Okay, but then they say, well, if it's not mine, who is it? Because if you're working with another person clearing, and you notice physiological change as a result of working with that person, and then if you're in a clearing relationship, that you're clearing the other. So then you think that the charge that you're picking up belongs to the other, but in actual fact it doesn't belong to the other either. It's just that the other has been so used to that particular feeling, it's become familiar, it's become the default setting, but ultimately wasn't theirs either. And it's recognizing that it's just information passing through our awareness that doesn't actually belong to you, it doesn't belong to them, it doesn't belong to anyone. It's just information held in the field that your little antenna are picking up on. And your antenna are picking it up because that's what you've been conditioned to believe.